it's the one hill I'll die on. If even if I don't like a writer attacking an artist or an artist attacking a writer in comics, if one is trying to stop the other one from talking or canceling them, I will always stand up for the other one. And not because I like their work or I like them as a person, but it's the Voltaire statement that I don't agree with anything you say, but I'll die for your right to say it. I think that's a truth that rings in my heart all the time when I'm creating.
Hey guys, this is Kami Ken, and welcome back to one really long conversation about comics and life. And today I'm joined by my mentor, Nick Pitarra.
Ken, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And mentor, Ken likes to come over and eat pizza while we complain about the comic book industry. He helps me color a little bit. I'll overdraw him a little bit. It's a good time. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, and I just wanted to get into like a little short conversation about writing in comics and how you've recently made a transition from being mostly just an artist to also writing your own book and putting that out there.
The process for me when I decided to write, I think when we're drawing a story, we're doing, if it was a movie, we're doing the cinematography, the character's ability to act. We are doing a lot of the lighting sometimes, depending on if you cross hatch or not, or if you color your own work. We do the pacing, we do all the shot selection, we do the character designs, the looks of the characters. I think in movies, like the screenplay is kind of in the background when you go to the award ceremony.
Yeah.
But if you see the best actor, the best cinematography, the best special effects, all the other awards would be what the artist does. So
Right.
I think we do a lot of storytelling visually.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like the writer is just the screenplay writer, and then you're the actor, the director, the sound, the music guy. Like you do all of it.
When we're stopping a scene and starting a scene, what moment,
Right.
the writer might suggest that, but we're the ones drawing it. So I think comics these days, at least for the last 10, 15 years, they have it backwards where they're promoting the writers really heavy, at least in the big two arena that I was in. And a lot of times for me, some of the scripts I'd work with just a loose plot, and then I'd go in and do all the drawing and acting, and then give the kind of the Marvel style, which
Right.
the Marvel style, if people don't know, is where you don't get a tight script that says panel 1, panel 2, down shot, 3, 4 shot. You get a paragraph that says turn this into a story, a lot like how Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko worked with Stan Lee. And so once I did that, it actually was good training to think about, well, I can come up with a plot for myself for ax-wielder John. And I've talked about this before, but the story of when I decided to write for myself was with ax-wielder, and I would suggest this for any artist, was not this part, but what happened with me was I had a new daughter. She was sick. My career was on hold, and I had some time to reflect in the hospital. And for me, it was like, you call yourself an artist, but you haven't said anything. I wanted to say something about being a new dad, about the men in my life, the people that have influenced me. And so I wanted to put the mask of a character like ax-wielder John up and then tell like a moral tale and let people judge him by the book of the look of the cover of the book.
Right.
And so for me, it became like, okay, you're an artist, but you're just being used as someone else's brush. What do you have to say? And so with ax-wielder, it's a lot of what I wanted to have to say as a storyteller and and it's something that became more me. And I think a big part of drawing better and better, that hierarchy from when you first draw to the next time you draw, I think that's a fun game to play because I think your merit will eventually get you to a level where you can get work. But what I really like about the writing side is I get to put more of me in the character, more of myself, more of my humor, more of my the aesthetic. I think about this room with all the toys and all the books that we surround ourselves with, and we put that stuff around us, but that stuff influences you. And that's really interesting that, like, did I build this room or is this room building me? And there's like a reflection of stuff. So for me, when I started writing John, I was just reflecting on my life and the things that you recall instantly that are truths or emotional moments, or a lot of times the inverse of the truth. But either way, if it's good and in the light, you're defining one side of it. And then if it's in, think about like a dad, and you can think about your own father or your own mother. I'd like think about stories. We'll be like, this part's so good, but I wish they would have done this. You can, when you get a little older and you see your parents as human for the first time, you're like, my dad was good at this, this, and this, but this, and this, he wasn't so good at. I think if you look at, give the dark side power, you're actually defining the perfect dad figure between the negatives and the positive of your own dad, right? So whenever I started storytelling, whenever I would critique, like a good movie I really liked was Shape of Water by Del Toro.
I've heard of it, but
yeah. There's a scene that's pretty controversial where she makes love to a fish man in it, right? Yeah, it's kind of a fantasy. But in it, when the fish man was touched, his skin would light up blue, and they're in the bathtub. And at the beginning of the movie, she doesn't have a boyfriend or anything, the girl who likes the fish man, and she sets a timer and plays with herself to get herself off. So in the movie, they show essentially the fish sex scene. But for me, when I was watching it, I thought that's not quite right. Not that I cared about the fish sex scene, but what I really thought was they've already set up that she can service herself, right? They already set up that he turns blue when he's touched. Why didn't Del Toro pull the shower curtain and show the color of blue when you touch the fish man's skin, and then cut the scene? Because then it could be sex or not sex, or they just touched.
It could be like left to the imagination.
Let the viewer participate. So it was almost a perfect movie for me, but I have that one edit. And then if you look at your whole life when you're being critical of stuff and critical of story, you're actually learning from that, like defining and figuring out how you might do it and let the reader participate in the storytelling. Yeah. And I started realizing that my life of being a critical viewer of media was actually training. Like everything I was doing was training. My hardships as a new dad was training to put it into the story. Right. And then I realized not only do I have something to say, but I've been training myself to say it. And that was when I really thought that I could be a storyteller beyond just an artist illustrating other people's stories.
Right. And do you think like that's something that all artists have in them, that they can also write? And do you think that they can write to the same level of quality that the writers in the comic industry can do?
I think we can. I think what scares us more than anything is we know how hard it was to get good at drawing, 5, 10, 15, 20 years to get good enough. And we appreciate the writing craft, knowing that we've done that path one time. Now we have the path of writing, and that's daunting. But in writing, the comic book writers are using us in a way, right, to tell their stories. They can go write prose and novels if they're such great writers, but they need us. And I realized with me that I could draw really good now. I've worked at Marvel, worked at DC, worked at Image, but now I was a pretty good artist to launch a new writer's career. And so what does that journey look like? I think there's really simple books like Save the Cat, which tells you the beats of storytelling, like why a catalyst comes in, about the percentage of time the catalyst comes in, which changes the dynamic of a story. Hero's journey stuff, on writing with Stephen King. Like, I love reading those kind of books. And so really you've already, instead of looking at it like, oh, I've got to learn to write now, looked at your whole life. You've absorbed this pop culture and absorbed story, and that was your training, and now just sharpen it. And that was a big jump for me. And then I started learning little tricks by examining a little harder the books I was reading. And I like one good trick was, or one problem that I've seen new writers, because with my line at Kuroshi and crowdfunding books now, I'll get people who have a good character design, but when they start writing, they'll put the exposition right in their mouths, and that's always a killer for me, right? But what I like, a good trick around that, if someone wants a tip, is let two people have two different conversations, and that gives them their own world. They live off the page. And an example in Ax-wielder John is there's two executioners, and one is worried about retiring and getting out of there, getting out of the castle and all the problems in the castle, and the other is the executioner's replacement, and he's worried about what his cool executioner name's going to be. So when they're in the chaos of stuff, the old executioner named Frank is like, I just got to get out of here, kid, this and that. And then the other guy's saying, just don't fuck me on my nickname today, and it gives them, and if you've noticed some dialogue, a lot of times when me and you were talking, you're probably thinking about the next question you have. I'm thinking about how clear I'm coming off, and we're not really great listeners, and making your characters bad listeners and we're a little more egocentric will instantly give them a bit of life in like two little brains talking, instead of the writer's brain trying to cram in stuff that two characters wouldn't necessarily say. Like I wouldn't necessarily say now to Ken, Ken, that we have been hanging out for 6 years.
Right.
Well, we know that already,
Right.
but you might look at the way we laugh or that we're next to each other. We're showing it, and how we're comfortable with one another will show that we must be comfortable. We're in my studio and we're doing this podcast. That shows it by itself. And I think show don't tell is so important with new writers. And so my big tip is like, give each character their own problem and their own worries that percolate in the dialogue, and it'll make them feel a little more alive off the page, and it'll feel more honest. That was something I learned pretty early.
Right. Yeah, because I'll see that a lot where even in manga they'll put exposition in the dialogue between characters that the characters they themselves already know, but then they're giving that information to the reader, but it comes off awkward because it's just more exposition.
There's a good solution to that is think about for those two executioners, having it be an old executioner and a new executioner is really good. Put one of the characters in the situation for the first time, like as they're walking through the halls and they're examining all the torture devices, the guy's explaining that, and he has to explain it to the guy. But if it's two old executioners, if he's explaining it, it's exposition. But you understand, like put a character in a situation where the exposition comes natural,
Right.
because then the reader now is downloading that information in an honest way, instead of being a character saying things that they wouldn't necessarily say. And I think thinking about that is super important. And it seems obvious, but then kind of work your story, make a different scene, make another oddball thing, make a new character that hasn't been in that scene, or figure out a storytelling device that makes it flow, that makes it
Right.
flow and doesn't feel dishonest.
Right. And this is just something that I've always thought of in terms of like the comic industry and the difference between writers and artists is I've always wondered, like, do the artists work harder than the writers? Or like the writers since they're only writing the words, they can work on multiple projects, whereas the artist has to, it's almost like I don't want to be like really crass here, but it's like one guy impregnating multiple girls. It's like the artist brings the comic to term, like it's actually like they have to put in the work monthly or yearly to bring the book to fruition, whereas the writer can give this artist a new story, give this artist a new story, give this artist a new story. Was there something about that dynamic that rubbed you the wrong way in the as an artist on that side?
That rubs all artists the wrong way. The function of the business is that they realized you would get 5 or 6 times the promotion if you started promoting the writers over the artist, and they started taking the power away, because putting $1,000 into my promotion goes a lot further with Jonathan Hickman or a new writer, whoever it is, because they can write 5 or 6 books, so they're getting 5 times, 6 times the promotion. But we're the ones making the books. If all artists one day said we're writing for ourselves, all comic writers disappear. If all writers one day say we're drawing our own books, then all comic books disappear. They're not going to be as good anymore, right? And I think also just that they could write 6 to 1 is a pretty good ratio, not to throw away the writing or a great idea. That might be everything, that might be the whole essence of the thing. but who's making the labor and producing the work is the artist, and it's taken a 20-year skill set. And everyone, we find out when you're a comic book artist, has an uncle with an idea. Oh, this character or this idea, and that's like how Stan Lee, in a lot of ways, created the Marvel Universe. Then Jack Kirby goes and he draws it all out, and then your uncle who can get a newspaper and put word balloons in a Sharpie and make funny noises, and then all of a sudden that's writing. It's a co-creation, but make no mistake that the artists are doing most of the work. And when even a lot of deals are 50-50, I'll give you 50-50 pay. No, it should be like 80-20 pay. It should be like 90-10 pay, because I'm the one making the labor of the work. I got in an argument with one writer, and I was drawing these giant pages, and he was mad at me. We have a 50-50 deal, and I was going slow, because I wanted to make it really good. And I usually don't get in fights or bring this up, but with him, he was yelling at me and cursing at me. So I was like, and I just said off the cuff, I was like, I do 10 times the work as you. You say someone destroying a city in 1 second and make it look cool. Well, that's going to take me 2 weeks of 2-3 double page spreads of little tiny details, and maybe that was childish of me, but that is how I feel. And then there's a part of me too, where at some point, if I know that I'm just one of the 5 engines of building someone else's name and brands, and then when I see reviews, they're getting the credit for it. I said with ax-wielder, I said, okay, well, I can do that for me. I can figure that out for me. And the little bit of work I put on a page, spend that time reading a how-to book, spend that time really self-reflecting on story and the ideas that you want to tell. And then for writing in general, it's like, okay, what you're doing as an artist is, I'll give you an example of what our Crumb does. We're holding up a mirror to society. Maybe it's a mirror to ourselves, but a mirror to society. We're saying, this is what I see in you guys, and give it an honest take and do it well. And that's going to sing to other people that came up in your culture, right? A lot of times the artist has to sit right on the edge of what's acceptable sometimes and show the mirror back. So you're just not preaching to the choir sometimes, like everyone gets that. You're not saying anything new, but if you can show a different light on something, you're going to have to hold that mirror out just on the edge of what's acceptable, maybe a little bit inside that edge. And this is why Art Crumb is fantastic. And Art Crumb does these really gross comics, right? Crazy, yeah. He's crazy, and I don't like the comics necessarily. I like his ability to draw, but I don't necessarily love his comics. But think about where his mirror is at, and so like if you start reflecting on a society, everyone inside that society pulls back their bow and arrow to shoot. What? You don't like this? You don't like this? And they'll call it canceling, call it ostracizing. Right. The center's going to feel attacked. Well, now their arrows are up like this because our Crumb took it so far out there, and he's a little crumb out so far away doing disgusting stuff that all the arrows get shot over our head, and it allows us as artists to exist in a comfortable place to make our books because we're not as bad as Crumb in whatever he's doing. And so thinking about him as what he's actually providing a safe space for all of the artists to exist because he's taken it so far. Right. And I actually like that that's expanded. Maybe he's gone too far for my personal taste as a reader, but he hasn't. But I think we need that place to exist. Otherwise, it's like more constricted. And I'm not conservative or liberal when it comes to ideas. I think you can do any of them if you do them well. With ax-wielder John, it's really bloody. It's going to have sex and guts and violence. But I think you can put some heart in there. And then all of a sudden, a reader that might not be turned on by that aesthetic, now they're invested. And now, like when I had a heavy metal magazine in the 90s or the 80s, and I'm reading something that's got boobs or something, now another guy like me who didn't read comics will be like, this got boobs in it, but I really want this guy to win. All of a sudden, you got my dilemma of how to explain why this is cool. Right. I remember when we first met, and I won't tell what the subject is, but you were reading, web comics, and you were telling me about I know what you're talking about. Yeah. You can tell me, but I always remember it. But it was this very oddball web comic, and what made you want to do it, but like it's kind of like almost embarrassing because it's not socially acceptable to even talk about that stuff. Right. But I do think that we need the place as artists to have the freedom. That's why freedom of speech is so big. To have the freedom to think and do the things and fail and succeed, because that playground needs to be a safe space, and guys like R. Crumb provide that for us. And making good content with that aesthetic provides that for you. And things with like Axe-Wielder, I love masculinity and He-Man, but I want to do it at a better level. You know, that's my goal. I don't know, but I want to do that at a better level. And if I can put that out into the world and do it at a better level, then I put a little more ding of masculine, violent characters that are more socially acceptable, because the concrete symbolism and the concrete stories, the essence of the masculinity can be told, even though on paper there's no women in it, and there's no minorities in it, right? But you know what I mean? Like, I don't care about that stuff. I would never want to work with a creator who forces that on anyone. I think make your best work, but if you make it really good, and unapologetically make it really good and put your best into it, I think it rises. I think it rises in a culture. That voice gets to get heard. I think something like, when I look at my kids, I see them draw, and I will destroy them at drawing. But there's a real charm when they do their best and their best work. And guess what? It goes up on the fridge, and it goes higher on the fridge, and it's the first one in front of the magnet. And I think if you make good work over time, God or the universe will take your work and put it a little higher than everyone else's on that fridge. So you want to be placed on God's fridge. You know, you want to get it, you want to do work good enough to get to that level where, and then all of a sudden the accolades come, the good reviews come, maybe the money comes, you know, God willing, and you can make really, really good work. And you can do it with any aesthetic you want. It doesn't have to be in a church. I don't want to preach to a choir. I want to do it with an awesome guitar riff. I want to do it with, you know, blood and guts and violence. And then you're in the perfect spot to tell your story. Everything that you loved when you were coming up, the 90s aesthetic of and the early aughts aesthetic of anime, there are other people that came up in that culture just like you. So now do your best work and use that aesthetic. And you don't have to go like, I think I found God or the universe or whatever, and I need to go preach in the streets. No, you show, don't tell. You were like these quiet wizards working in our studios, and you're doing something really special where you're placing little items to tell the old moral tales, the same seven stories over and over again, that in our hearts we know is true. And then the coolest part is we get it in all these different voices, and what you need to be is right where you're at right now, just doing better and better work and play that game, and then make an item and put it out into the world, and it could be something really special, and then it could rise up if you do it good enough.
Right. I actually, on that point, I actually heard a interview between Ari, I forget his last name. He's the guy that he's the comedian who did a special called Jew recently.
Ari
Shafir, yes. And he spoke with Joe Rogan, and he was talking about he was on LSD, or he did DMT or some drug, that when he talked about making a new creation, he was talking about how he made Jew his new special, or his special at the time, and how when he created that and put that out into the world, he could see it physically manifested when he was on the drugs. He could see it almost physically manifested, and it just went up out into the universe or out into space as a new star that would just kind of exist there as this thing that he fully created and fully completed. And that kind of fell in line with the thoughts that I had about creating new work, and that if you create a work that you really believe in, that's really a good, solid thing, that lasts forever. And that's part of what drives me to create the work that I'm doing right now to the best of my ability, because I know that it will last, or it will continue on beyond me and continue forever. And I'm wondering, Nick, like, what's your ultimate goal with creating Axe-Wielder John? What kind of idea are you trying to put out into the world that people can learn from? Or are you just trying to get Axe-Wielder to be the next Mortal Kombat character in the next 15 years? Or what's your goal with it?
Well, it's interesting, like about like manifesting the work. It's cool because you can put two different lenses on. You can put like your material man lens and say, okay, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to draw this thing. I'm going to hide this message in it behind blood and guts. But you can, what Ari was getting to was like John 1 in the Bible is the Word is God and the Word is with God. And God speaks creation, right? Well, the Word is just your mind into the world with words. We'll make it more permanent by drawing it or writing it down, right? They'll all get washed away. The words in a second, that vibration's gone. This will stay around a little longer because it's material, but that'll get washed away too. If you get into the esoteric stuff like Alan Moore, the Hermetics, they say all is mind. Well, they're literally saying the same thing as all is. They say all is mind in like the Kabbalion, and that's like one of the rules. Right. But they're just saying the word is God. So you can pick either or lens, and the lens that I really like looking at is that we are these. We're manifesting stuff with our hands, and maybe the ideas I have for John, the hopes, the future I have for it, the ritual is making marks on paper. That's the ritual. And this is, so it's like a ritual magic in a sense. To spell is simply to spell. The grammar is the book of grimoire. And I say when we draw people to us. And I thought with John, I was going to draw the future that I wanted for myself by doing this magic work. You know, that's what I thought. Even though like magic and Christianity is crazy or whatever, I don't care. Like you can see that happening, and you can look at that. So with John, what I really wanted was, instead of doing other people's properties and investing my energy and my work and my talents into other people's ideas, I was going to manifest a character, like when you select an avatar on Twitter or on Instagram that represents you, I was going to manifest a character that represented me. If you think of Hellboy, you think of Mike Mignola. If you think of Madman, you think of Mike Allred. Right. If you think of Usagi Yojimbo, you think of Stan Sakai. They have a character that represents them, that becomes their pillar in the community. Instead of doing 40 backup stories, I'm going to sink them all into one thing and put my energy in that one thing. Then every time I tweet the character out, it's promotion for me and not for Marvel. It's promotion for me and not some writer. And you're feeding yourself, and you're pumping yourself up. And if you're at a level where you think you can draw, if you're a level where you're getting really good work, well, then you're already standing out enough to get work. So why not make your character now? And then that doesn't mean I'm just going to make a character and fill it with exposition and not think about pacing and turning and page turns. You've got to do that work too, but you know how to do that work already. And you asked earlier, do I think artists can write? And I'll give you this, and I've said this many times and I love saying it. Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Robert Kirkman, Rick Remender, Brian Michael Bendis, Donnie Cates, they have one thing in common. You already know because I say it all the time in here. They have two things in common. They're great writers. They're the best writers. Go look when they were 16 and see what they want it to be. They all want it to be cartoonist. Each one is a failed cartoonist that transitioned to writing so other people could draw for them. So I'm just those guys, since I made it as an artist, with a little less quit in me. If they can do it, I can do it too. I don't think anyone's so special. I think stories and excavation. It's if you read On Writing, right. Stephen King talks about this, where you kind of get an idea and it floats down, and then there's little pieces of it that fit, and it just starts fitting together. And you're finding story, and you're not creating it. I think a lot of these are really good. I mean, something that's really cool that really blew my mind recently was All-Star Superman. So this is cool. We were defining symbolism that's already here, kind of like Plato's shapes or something. This is what I mean. But Batman, over 70 years, okay, he operates in the dark. Okay, he's the Dark Knight. Okay, cool. He's completely material in Bruce Wayne. He has a material existence as a billionaire. And by the time you get to Dark Knight Returns, people have whittled him down to his essence of a grounded man without God. He's so distrusting of everyone that he's got plans to take down the JLA and his other friends, right? Versus Superman. And that wasn't one person who came up with that. It was everyone going, like I said at the beginning of this, Batman's like this, but he's kind of like this. No. I got rid of this, but it's like this. And we're shaping it. And then you get to that final form. You can't get lower on the ground than Frank Miller drawing him in ink, scratchy, all the way low to the ground. Glass, he's completely mortal. He's completely in a bleak world. And then Superman, everyone chipping away at that for years. And then All-Star Superman is an image. You can argue with me to the death on this, but you'd be wrong. It's an image of Superman as Jesus Christ. And he comes down from above. He's powered by the light. I'm the truth, the light, and the way. He's the very symbol of hope on his chest. He floats down, and he pretends to be a mortal man for a little while. And he doesn't leave until the man that schemed to kill him, Lex Luthor, gets a bit of his power, a bit of his Holy Spirit, and then he leaves with his message of hope. And a lot of people's favorite Superman story is All-Star Superman, and a lot of people's favorite Batman story is Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller. They crystallize both of them. They're the bookends, two Franks drew the bookends of the man without God and the man with God. It poured out of their pencils, but it took thousands of minds, creative minds, forming that. And I say they're the bookends because if you have a different version, the Neil Adams version, the animated version of Batman, it's going to fit between Franks and Franks. They're the bookends, and they're the antidote to one another. And I think how did that happen? Like, how did we recreate 2D Jesus, you know?
And also, why is it Frank?
Why was it two Franks? And why was it Dark Knight Returns and Batman and Superman Leaves? Yeah. And Superman, I'm really fortunate to own the cover of this. Superman's also aware of his own incoming death. He types his own newspaper, The Death of Superman. Like, he types that paper. And Jesus does that too. And I'm not saying it's a perfect parallel, but isn't that cool that one of these ancient stories it percolates, and if we all work on it with care and love, and we're not just trying to destroy the symbol that we're building, and we're like, it's like this. So those things exist. We just got to reach into the ether and find it. The ether isn't a void black space. It's filled with these complete objects, just like Plato's shapes. And Plato's shapes is like the idea of a perfect circle is not here. We don't have any perfect circles in the material world. But if we reference the perfect circle, we can get to the moon. We can do awesome mathematics. We can chase pi forever, right? The perfect triangle doesn't exist here, but that's like the strongest reinforced shape, right? A chair, like the idea. What's more important, the idea of a chair, or one single perfect chair? The idea, like, you obliterate everything, the idea is still there. The idea of mathematics is still there. These ideas, like dragons in different cultures, or Christ figures in different cultures, they're all pointing to something. And I think that's so fun that those things are more eternal than the stuff that we think is this material stuff. This will wash away in time. All-Star Superman washes away in time. Christ, the idea is fading with people. But guess what? We resurrect him as All-Star Superman. Like, what? What? We did it on accident? We did it on purpose? And it's something we're contributing to all together and separately, whether we know it or we don't, you know? And then you can pick different things, dragons and all kinds of cool stuff. And I think that's fascinating. And I think we need the space and the mental space to think about this stuff comfortably without being canceled or without whatever, you know? And I think guys like R. Crumb that aren't my taste, but man, do I love that guys like that exist, because they let us be us. You know, they let us play and find those shapes and craft them. And if you think about some of the symbolism in the world and some of the ancient stories and some of the fairy tales that have formed us, just like this room, are we forming them or are they forming us? And that's a really crazy thing to think about. And that's what I love about story. And with John, as a material man, I want to make him my Hellboy. When you see ax-wielder John and he has no face, you're gonna think that's that crazy Nick Pitarra guy. Is he Christian? Is he esoteric black magic? I don't know. I'm just an artist that wants to make cool stuff and do it well. You know, put good into the world. And whatever God is to you, God is good. And we're dropping good items down to represent something that hopefully gets snagged up by like-minded people and it gets tagged on that refrigerator. And that's the goal.
And I think a lot of these ideas, they they come from fearlessness, like the ability to not be afraid to say what you mean or say what you feel through your work or through yourself. I think when we have that open forum to be able to discuss ideas and to say to each other what we actually mean instead of trying to hide or suppress or cancel people for what they're thinking or what they're actually believing out of some kind of misguided idea of tolerance. Like if we actually were to openly or actually and this might sound wrong or whatever, openly and actually be racist or openly and actually be like sexist, like we could actually put the ideas out there so that people can actually discuss and like figure out the ideas instead of being afraid to express them. And I think that's what comics is all about. Is really being able to push the medium or push things as far as they can go, like R. Crumb was doing, and allow other people to bring their ideas together to make it more of a stronger medium in general.
I think it's about, just like I was saying, that's kind of wrong, that's kind of right. When we're judging story, you got to trust the individual. I think it's about trusting the individual or the group. For me, I'm an artist, so it's singular, but let you make your racist book, Ken. I won't. I personally won't do that.
No way.
But when he makes that, and if he makes that as a mistake, trust the audience to, like, oh, he is doing something bad. I don't want to do that, Or if it's something, if it lights something up, and you would never want to close off that playground, and there's something like the market will reflect, if it takes off, it gets put on that fridge or not. Right. But for me, I trust the individual person to be like, because there's people that wouldn't like this bloody chopping people up, blood and guts book. There's some people that wouldn't want that to exist. Not in today per se, because we're used to Game of Thrones and stuff. But there was a time where, like, I don't want nudity, I don't want this, corrupting of culture. I don't push it that far, but that's because the culture's conditioned a little more now. But there was a time where you couldn't do that kind of book, and I just don't think that's right. I don't. And if it's not, maybe it's not right for the time. Maybe you can go too far. But I trust the individual buyer or the individual reader to, and then we're good and bad examples both. You're either going to be a good example or you're going to be a bad example. And I'm okay with everyone being good or bad examples, And then when I see something that repulses me, it just redefines what's good for me. It can, there's a way the universe flips it to a good, And I think that's a good thing. And I think as artists, we just need that freedom of speech. Number one is so important, because it's not freedom of speech. Because if I am putting it down on the page, if I'm worried that I'm going to be canceled or something like that, then it's actually freedom of the thought. I don't even get to put the thought out there. Right. And then if you make it so restricted, then it becomes this fascination. Whereas just like if you were super sexist, which you're not, but if you were, would it be better that I knew you were, or would it be better that you hid it? I'd rather see, like, put all the cards on the table and let's see what everyone is. And I don't know what the benefit is, one or the other, and then it's this quick fix thing that actually that restriction for me as an artist is unacceptable. For me personally, it's the one hill I'll die on. Even if I don't like a writer attacking an artist or an artist attacking a writer in comics, if one is trying to stop the other one from talking or canceling them, I will always stand up for the other one. And not because I like their work or I like them as a person, but it's the Voltaire statement that I don't agree with anything you say, but I'll die for your right to say it. I think that's a truth that rings in my heart all the time when I'm creating, because I think we need the right to say it. And then even better, if you are sexist and you say that stuff, and then I make a counterpiece of art or argument or gesture that says the otherwise, we've got to be able to have that duel, that back and forth, so you can grow and I can grow, Otherwise, you're not healed and I'm not healed if we're not buddies in this. If you're just othered and I'm just othered, then there's no, you're just isolating people that have those thoughts recluse, and then it's festering in them, and you're not healing them by giving them a little bit of that Superman, or you give a little bit of that good. You're putting them in a jail cell and treating them like they're nothing, and maybe their actions might warrant that to you, but if you want to heal them, you've got to touch them, and you can't let that mix. And so, since we're talking about being vulnerable as artists, and we alluded to that manga comic book, and you agreed with me that it's all about vulnerability and freedom of speech, would you like to enlighten your audience and tell them what exactly that manga was about?
I'm gonna get into this in a later video, but I'm also gonna tell y'all what the book is about right now. The book is called Onani Master Kurosawa, and it's about.
This is where you got to be brave. You gonna level up, Padawan. You called me your mentor. I got you in a mind trap. See, just like two different conversations, right? When I trapped Ken, the whole time I was talking, I wasn't actually thinking I'm saying some nice stuff for you guys to hear. I was trying to catch him in a game where I knew I had to expose him. Now I put the young Padawan on the spot now. Is he ready to make that leap of faith of freedom of speech? He was nodding his head. He agreed with the R. Crumb stuff. R. Crumb isn't as bad as what he was listening to, but man, and he said, man, it could be sexist stuff, and I said it could be violent stuff. So I trapped him. So the whole time in an honest conversation, I had a little different buzz going on in my head. So now he's on the spot. Let's see what he does.
I'm just gonna say it. It's it's this book about this middle schooler who every day after school he goes to the girls' bathroom at his school and jerks off.
Oh God.
And that's what the story is about. But it's one of the best stories I've ever read, and I'm standing on that. Nobody can tell me otherwise. You have to read it for yourself to understand it, because in context, it's actually an amazing story about overcoming like bullying and lies and deception and all that stuff and making true friends. So I'm going to go into the video about it later on the channel and make a whole thing about it. But right now, that's the book that Nick always remembers and talks to me about. And I'm like, how does he remember that, but not my name, you know? But yeah, that's what the book is about. It's the comic that actually inspired me to start writing. It's the one thing that made me believe that I could also be a writer, because it wasn't drawn the best. It didn't look like any professional comic I'd seen, and it was completely in pencils. There wasn't any inks or anything like that. It didn't even look official, like an official manga. It was just a very simple story, well told, and it just had a crazy, wacky premise that is really hard to forget. So, yeah.
And that's why, even though the content might have been awful, but like even on paper it would be banned or whatever. But think about what it's done for Ken's life. He's gone to the Kubert School. He's won the scholarship 3 years. He's on this path of storytelling. All the works that are going to come from him, all the works that he's going to touch, how him in my life is going to touch my work. Why would you put that flame out? He can correct, like things will correct themselves. And why would you? If that sparked his interest when he was a young teen, and it lit a fire under him to be a storyteller, why would you stomp that out? And that's the long game that people got to think about and appreciate. So I think this is a great conversation and a good time to end it, Ken. But a good artist mentor trap right there. But I think you get another merit badge. One more badge on your Girl Scout cookie chest. Yeah, you got it. Awesome, dude. Thanks for having me on, Ken, and really proud of you, and really excited to see you expanding into social media. And thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.